Good day everyone, and welcome to another tutorial. In this one we will be talking about the video that I uploaded yesterday. It's a post-processing effect that is built into a node. I'm going to teach you guys how I approach these kinds of issues so that you can build this yourself without too much trouble. So let's break it down. That's the primary thing to do with this sort of thing. So we have some sparkles. We've got a vignette, cloudy vignette. We've got animation. We've got the outlines. What else? What else? We also have this foggy kind of effect. And I think that covers basically all of it. So let's build these things in the easiest order possible. So the easiest order would be to get the outlines first, because that's going to be affected by everything else. The reason why is whenever you see any anime or whatever, the final animation is treated as film. So you get glows and all that kind of stuff over your outlines. So we also have the sparkles. The sparkles will be over everything as well. The vignette is over everything. I think that covers the whole lot of it. So let's get started with the foggy glow and the outlines. Outlines first. So instead of using freestyle, let me just make sure this thing is on 50%. It just works faster for compositing and whatever. Make sure normal passes on, because that's what this is going to be based on. And we also want to make sure that CryptoMatte is on, not for this project specifically, but for future projects. So if you want to add this outline to, say, a new project that you're doing, you can just add it because the mask is already, there's a space for the mask. It's just easier. So let me show you. See, there it is. Clean as a whistle, absolutely no difference, and quite harsh, to be honest. That's not going to make a difference because of all the fogginess and whatever else, so don't worry about that. To fix it, all you do is you just use a higher sample count. Let me show you. Simple as that. It's just not necessary, so I'm going to use one for the sake of speed. So compositor. And there is our normal pass. These CryptoMatte passes we'll get to, but that's not an issue. I just want to see, yeah, it's shift and right click. That gives you that little slice to join the paths. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to get a filter node. The filter node is going to be used for the normal, and it's going to be set to, I pronounce it Laplace. I think it's Laplace, but I really am not sure. At least the anime shows something about pronunciation. So let's flip that around. Just want to get some space here. Okay. Alt V gives you the zoom in feature. Okay, one thing you're going to notice when you do this is that the lines are extraordinarily thick and harsh. That's just because it's at 50% HD. The line thickness is relative to the resolution size. It's actually, no, it's absolute, not relative. I had that confused. Now there are two solutions for this. There's an anti-aliasing outline, anti-aliasing node in the works. I built one, but because it's quite heavy to process stuff like this, I'm just going to recommend for you guys to just use the same filter node and set it to soften and make it like 0.5. It's not perfect, but it'll do the job. Just for interest, I want to show you guys what the anti-aliasing one looks like. See, that's what the anti-aliasing looks like. As you can see, it does have an issue with diagonal areas, and it does have a minor issue with corners, but it is legit anti-aliasing. It's basically the same as FXAA. But again, use soften. Okay, so to make sure this outline is over only the characters we want it over, typically you don't want this over your background. You just want to make sure that you have a mask. So to have a mask, you simply use the cryptomat. Under your mat category, you find the cryptomat node, and you connect these inputs. You don't need to plug in the image, but it's fine if you do. So let's get them picker, and let's just pick our Minky. Now remember, this is not the final mask because you can't depend on cryptomat to be the same in every project. So this will be outside of the group node for outlines. So this will be our little mask. So what you can do is you simply use this as a mask like that so that you only get the outlines concerned. But you can see that it got some of the outlines off. We'll be covering that in a second. And then it will be multiplied over the final image. Okay. Because that's how you add outlines. You multiply them over the final result. So let's just switch those around. And I'm going to make this black. No, I'm not going to make it black. I made it black in a different way, but not in this case. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply use a dilate and erode node, and I'm going to expand the mask by one step. And with that done, that should look really, really nice, as you can see. So that's going to be our final one, not this one. Okay, so this is going to be a little node group for outlines. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a node group with all of these and just say Control G. Anyway, let's rename it. So this first image one is technically our normal pass. The mask is the mask and the image is the image. So let's just rearrange these. Normal is usually at the bottom, like that. Okay, we have no double inputs as far as I can tell. Nope, no double inputs. Let's just call this one Quick Outline Node Group. And click the shield so that it's protected within the project should we remove it for whatever reason. Okay, so next let's do that little foggy type thing because that was obviously the next one. So that would be a blur node because it has to be blurred and then mixed with the original sharp image. That's just one way of doing it. So let's make this one and color mixed with the original. And group these two. Okay, so obviously these two are exactly the same. So I'm going to make this one the factor and delete the second input. I'm also going to add the size because we want to be able to control the size from the outside. So I'm going to call this one intensity. We can leave it on size, but I don't know. Intensity is a good one for me. Let's make this one factor. And I think that'll do. Remember, you can set your default values in here so that if you import it fresh in a new project, that's the default that will stick in there, or if you append it or whatever the case might be. So let's get outside the node and let's call this one Quick Blur Node Group. Click the little shield to make sure it's safe. And we can up, and let's just reduce the factor. There we go. You can always flip the inputs here so that the higher the factor, the more blur you get, or lower, less, whatever. You know, like this. Just do that. Now you have it in the reverse. Okay, so I'm going to leave it as is because I think it's fine. So now we have our outlines and our blur. Now for the difficult part. Let's see our list. So we've got the fogginess done. We've got our outlines done. I'm going to start with the vignette because it's easier. We just have to remember it's the last step. So you know what, let's skip the vignette. Let's skip the vignette for now. It's going to go with the we're going to go with the sparkles first. I just want to close this extra window so we work in only this one. Now, how do you create sparkles? Now, in this instance, I used a cloud texture. I recommend you follow the same thing because that means that this works in every project, not just ones with particles. Particles can be a real pain in the neck in terms of integration. In this instance, all you do is you integrate it with a depth map or a mist pass. It's really not a big deal. So I prefer the procedural way. It's a little slower, a lot slower, but it's less of a pain. So let's quickly add a cloud texture. So input texture. I'm going to create a new one. Well, let's use this one. This is one I created in the first run that had absolutely horrible audio. This audio isn't perfect either because I'm using a headset mic. I'm not using my actual dedicated mic. The reason for that is while I'm talking with you guys, I'm using the keyboard. So the sound kind of travels through the table and to the microphone, you know, like if you lay your head on a table and you tap on the table, it's that sort of thing. So I'm not using that microphone. Okay, so let's use this one that says sparkle. Okay, so let's get a converter in here and check that out. That is really cool. So as you can see, it's stretched. Typically it is by a factor of half. It's not exactly half. It's a little bit less, but half works. So you're going to have to adjust this one relatively for every level within the sparkle field, whatever you want to call it, because we're going to work with layers. So first I'm just going to create sparkles and then we're going to talk about the layer aspect of it. So because it's where we're working with 1 to 2, this is what it's going to be looking like. So I'm just going to insert a value here because I want to make it smaller. And I'm going to use a math node to get the relative factor here. And I'm going to use a combine RGBA because RGBA is also equal to X, Y, and Z. So always remember that. So this one is going to multiply everything in this value node by 2. So if I set this to 1, that goes in there, and I connect the other 2 standard, just straight up, and I connect this, you should see no difference. Just like that. A little math goes a long way. Okay, so I'm just going to move this down because we're going to be using the offset as well. But not right now, we're just going to do the sparkles first, and then we'll get to all that stuff. Okay. So getting a color ramp, we want to make this very sharp. Yeah, I see. That's why I said I want to make it smaller already. Let's make it about 2. Gonna have to give a little bit more. I think something like that will be fine. Now, one thing I recommend is don't overdo it. Don't take the long way. There is a glare node. Let's use it. Don't try to blur this vertically and then add another blur node and blur it horizontally and then combine the two. It's just a waste. Just go into the filter category, get a glare node, and let the glare node do the work. Optimization. Besides, this should be faster since it's at about half resolution, set at medium. So, yeah. So turn the threshold down because the threshold says what is the brightness value that affects the glare node. Obviously, we want everything affecting it, so it has to be 0. It's also not bright enough, so take a color mix node so that we can add this over itself without lamping it, sorry. So we can make it brighter. So let's use about 6. Yeah, I think 6 looks nice. And we're going to duplicate the glare node because anime glares are not just little stars. They're a lot fancier. And we're going to set this to 45 degrees. And we're going to add these two over each other. So we get something like that. Very nice. Very, very nice. This one I want to make 0.95. See what that looks like. Nah, has to be 0.9. We're going to reduce this one to be 0.5. And we're going to brighten it up. I just don't think it'll be 6. You know what? 6 is actually fine. We'll use 6. Okay, clamp that. And we're also going to be blurring this over itself so that there is a soft glow around the sparkles. So get a blur node. Just take the normal one. Fast Gaussian, relative, just make it about 5. 5 is quite intense, and the dots are quite small, so together it gives us a nice fuzzy appearance. So then you can just add that over, not under. You have to add it over because we're going to give it a higher value. Let's give it about 2. Yeah, I think 2 looks really nice. Let's see what 3 looks like. Yeah, 3 is fine too. Just remember to clamp it as well. Okay, so now we can add this over our final. Let's get that image in here. And there we have our first little sparkles. Now this would just be considered the first layer. And remember, we don't have any interaction just yet. That is determined by the layer method, which I'm going to show you right now. Method, because I really want to illustrate what it does. So I'm going to add a cube in here, and I'm going to array this cube. Okay. Like that. And I'm going to duplicate this and offset it along the y-axis. Also quite a few. Okay, it's not going to go all that far. So let me bring it towards the camera instead. Okay. So that was the setup. That's the maximum distance that I used because the Suzanne head is only going about that far. So I'm just going to put that back. Okay. So there we have it. And if you look at the mist pass, let me just make sure I have a viewer node for it. If you look at the mist pass, that is what you'll see. So to layer it, I use the color ramp node and I set it to constant. You don't always have to set it to constant, but in this instance, I do because I want the interaction to be either there or not there. I like that intensity with this effect. So you can see this is what happens. So obviously black is at the front and white is all the way behind. So your first layer would be completely white because everything is going to be in front of it. Even if your character is like at the camera, you still want some sparkles to pass in front. So the first layer would be white. The second layer would have some occlusion, like this one. So let's say, okay, so that will be the first layer. And this is going to be the second layer. I think it goes a little bit further. And this is going to be our fourth layer, which you can choose to make the background, absolute background, everything except, the sky. But in this instance, I don't like doing that. I still want there to be some interaction, possibly. It's not a have to, it's just a personal preference. So this then becomes a mask for the particular sparkle layer that we want this to be on. So this is now going to be our first one, and second one. The first layer would be absolutely in front. And if you take the final result before glaring everything, which is this one, you have to make that black, obviously. Then you get, hold on, I'm just going to make all of it relevant to one point. See, you can see that it just vanished. Okay, so let's put that one over there. So if I were to offset this now, okay, so let's say this was like the back layer, whatever. Let me show you what that does. Just like that. Okay, now the thing is you have to make this relative to each layer so that you can simply animate a few simple values, making the whole process a lot easier. The whole idea with this is to improve our workflow so we don't have to build this whole thing from scratch every time we want to use the effect. So to do that, you're going to use an offset, and we only want the x-axis to be offset. So we're going to be duplicating this again. This one is scale, just name it scale, and this one is going to be named offset. So I'm not going to set a major value for that just yet. Remember, XYZ, RGB, exact same thing. And if you now, oh, sorry, not that one. If you now change the value, you will find it offset. So this is part of the animation that we need. So I'm going to animate this already. I'm just going to pick some random values. It's not a big deal. So I'm just going to make it like that. I'm just using I to keyframe it. Let's make it 0.5. I feel like 1 may be a little bit drastic. I'm just going to make it constant. It's animation, not constant, vector points, and extrapolation so that it continues into infinity, so I don't have to animate it constantly. So now if I use the arrow keys to scroll between frames, you can see that it moves all on its own. Extraordinarily slowly, but it moves all on its own. I actually want to make it a little bit faster, so let's go for the dope sheet. There we go. That's the default value, and I just want to move this over. It's a little faster. I want it to be a lot faster. Yeah, that's better. Okay, just going to leave it at that. Okie dokie. So with that done, we also have to add some scale to the mix. Okay, so scaling is going to happen after the fact. So what you need to do is you need to go to the distort category and use rotate, assuming you want this to be rotatable. I prefer it be rotatable. So all that you do is you put it in there, so that it's turnable. And of course we have to add a scale node, and I'm going to show you why we're adding a scale node in here. Generally you wouldn't, but I'm going to show you exactly why we would. So I'm going to separate the scale node for a second, and I'm going to take this and say output viewer. Okay. Now let's say I make this smaller. You're not going to change what you think. Look at that. That sucks. And that happens with rotation as well. Basically, it's a rasterization of the texture. So let me do this instead for a second. See, that's what happens. It's really annoying. So you really, really, really want this to be this case. Now, 2 doesn't fix it entirely. There's still this little edges over here in the corners. It's not going to make the biggest difference to your renders. It's just not. I'm going to show you why I say so. Now, if you put this at about 65, and it is set to 2, that's the edge that you get. So if you want to go 2.5 or 2.1 or whatever, have at it. I just use 2. It's fine. It's just fine. Okay, so let's just get this back. Now this instance, obviously it's going to be way too big. So, yeah. Okay, so where this is going to be a relative a subgroup of nodes is going to be at this juncture right here, because we're going to be using a different scale value and a different offset value for every one of these nodes, every one of these textures. But to have to duplicate this is actually very inefficient. Having a group node do it is just easier. So I'm just going to set that back to 0. And I'm going to make this a group node. Okay. Since it's already connected, we just call this one don't touch. The reason why you call it don't touch is because it's going to show up in the list as well. So you can just call this one sparkle textures and make it safe. So then all you do is you duplicate this for the next layer. That's going to be the offset, and what's the other one? The scale. So I'm going to duplicate this as well. Oh, sorry, that one goes in there. This just gets the normal one. You just disconnect. No, I didn't. This looked for a second like I connected the wrong one. Okay, so that goes into scale. Okay, offset is going to have to be adjusted, and scale is going to be adjusted as well. So all you're going to do is you're going to take a math node, and we're going to be going smaller. So this is for scale. Let's say we're going to go 0.5. Because we want it to be like half the resolution or half the size of this. And for offset, we also want it to be slower, so you can also make that 0.5. So that when we have our second layer, let's just mix and add them together. Using obviously a lot bigger. I did multiply it by 0.5, and that's also 0.5. That should be fine. That should be fine. Okay, so let's see how it moves. Okay, no, this is the last layer actually. So I had it wrong. So let's make this one the front, and let's make this one the medium. And we'll make one that's even smaller for the back. So I'm just going to duplicate. Hold on, I'm going to duplicate this whole set here. And I'm going to use this one for the factor. Let's just call it mask because it's really annoying, or layer. I'm going to call it layer instead of factor. There we go. Okay, and let's connect these two. So this is for scale. Scale is the lower one, and offset is the top one. There we go. Now, this is for the further back layer. So instead of 0.5, let's go 0.25. Let's go 0.25 and add this as well. That should be like really small. Okay. I'm not seeing anything. That's really strange. Let's see if I move it. There's a little star right there. Perhaps my color ramp is just a little bit too intense. Let's see if we can just loosen it up a bit. Not that much. Hold on, a little bit more. Let's do something like that. Okay. Just want to see something. Output viewer. I think I might be scaling these wrong. Yeah. We want to multiply them, we want them to be bigger. So in this instance, I'm going to use 1. No, I'm going to use 2. And for this one, I'm going to try 4. Because that's the intention. It has to be smaller. Yes, I had it reversed. By multiplying by point, you're actually increasing it. It's just the weirdness between the scale node and the scale and offset features of the textures themselves. So if I delete that and we view that, then we have all our stars. I think our offset might be going a little too fast. So I think this one shouldn't be as heavily offset, if I'm perfectly honest. This one should actually be, I think this one has to go in a different direction. So I'm going to make this one 0.25 and this one 0.5. Because it seems like it's doing the opposite of what I want it to do. Hey, there we go. Yeah, perfect. Let's get this big one over Suzanne for a second. Okay, see, we don't have this one on the primary layer. I think that would be this one. Let me just move it forward. Yeah, that's great. Okay, that's fine. So I'm going to move that back a bit, and I'm going to make the scale a little bit bigger so that we can add a fourth layer. You know what, I'll skip the fourth layer. I'm just going to make this one all white. So we just use 3 in this instance. So this one is going to be 0.5, and this one is going to be all the way at the back. Let's make it 0.9. Okay. That way we have occlusion and we have no occlusion as well. Absolutely stunning. I think it's still moving too fast though. No, it's fine. I'm going to leave it as is. So now that we have all of this together, you can use frames and other sorts of extra tools to make sure that everything makes sense for you. But basically, this is the finished node. So all you do is you select everything that's relevant. There we go. I think that is all of it. If you want to, you can include these as well in the group, but because they're nodes on their own and they're kind of their own effect, I wouldn't recommend that. And I'm excluding these because I want them to carry over the value. The only thing that I missed doing is connecting these so that I select only this little node. Otherwise, it creates 3 inputs for the offset and like a million for the other. So just shift right click, cut those, and we're going to be selecting everything again, including that. And when you press Ctrl G, you are set. And let's call this quick stars layered and save. And there's our offset and there's our scale. As you can see, it's just behaving weirdly, but it's fine. Now you can make this a lot more custom by adding the rotation function to the output of the node so you can adjust it from the outside. It's fine, doesn't matter. So for the vignette, I also added that to the official group, and I'm going to show you how to build it outside of the group just for the sake of interest. So info, let's get that texture again. So it's called sparkle, and it's got that x2 value again. And I use the same offset. So that when you look at the offset, the results of the node, you will see that it moves. Very cool. Hold on, let me just adjust this thing. It's called combine RGBA, not separate. There we go. So that it only moves along the x-axis. Much better. Okay, so you can sharpen it a little bit. It's not a big deal. Okay, but this is the important one. You get a lens distortion node and a color mix node because it does require some sort of image input. Just save often, please. And we're going to be using full distortion. No chromatic aberration, please. And now we're going to blur this. Not with that. The reason we blur this is so that we get that vignette mask. I learned this from Andrew Price years ago. So Really, really awesome node. Trick. It's not a node in itself. It's just a cool trick. Okay, so this forms a mask for our noise. As you can see, that is very cool. And this is obviously colored and added. I'm going to use this instead so that we can color it after the fact, you know, using the node controls. And let's make this like a reddish, not that one. I want us to say white. Let's make this a reddish kind of yellowy color like the final one. And this has to be black, sorry, not white. There we go. And then this can be added over our final result, which is this one over here. As you can see, it's a bit, yeah. So I'm going to, yeah, that's the one. I want it to be that bad. Yeah, something like that. That's really nice. And you can reduce the add and also overlay it so that the color has a much stronger effect on it. So also still factor, but this one has to be 0.5 so that everything above, so that only values, so that values can only get brighter. That's the whole point of making the darkest value 0.5. Otherwise, it'll make things darker as well. Oof, I hate it when I trip over my words like that. So this one you can make 1, and that's going to give you a much more yellowy kind of vibe, which is really nice. So if you move the cursor now, you'll see that your vignette lives as well. If you want it to be more like a misty, cloudy effect, instead of just simply moving along, you can use a math node again and use the offset and multiply it by 0.5 or whatever, and use B. B is, of course, our Z depth, so it's going to look like the clouds morph a little bit as they go. It's multiplied by 2. I can see that it's not going to respond the way I want it to. Yeah, I see, like that. That way it breaks up and comes back in and all that kind of stuff as it goes. Perhaps I should just leave it as is. It seems like it's moving either too slow or too fast, so let's just leave it alone and see what that does. Yeah, that's better. Gives it space to warp and change as it goes. And that is pretty much it. Seriously, that's pretty much it. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the cubes. Okay, the cubes are gone. So now we can just select a random frame, hit F12. And we have to make sure that our composite node is where it's supposed to be at. There we go. So if you want to, you can group this one as the, what do you call it? Vignette. Sorry. I just want to get that properly, and Control G. Obviously for the final, I built it into the final node, but I'm just going to show you what the final node looks like. Obviously it's muted, so I'm just going to unmute it so you can see it properly. So we've got depth, we've got image, we've got scale, offset, rotation, and the foggy color for the outside. If you look on the inside, I've got the sparkle star thing over here. We've got the vignette over here, and we've got our layers set up here. I used 4. So yeah, it's really not that complicated. If you follow these breakdown steps or whatever, you'll see that it's really not that complicated to build new stuff. What's difficult is when you want to make it dynamic so that it works in pretty much every shot, which is what this is. You have to make sure that your settings work in pretty much every environment, and that means more than using a few cubes or a monkey or whatever the case might be. You're going to have to make some actual demo scenes, or you can use some of the demo files from the Blender website and places like that. So that's it for this tutorial. I hope you guys find this useful. I hope you guys can use it in a practical way. Have a great one, and God bless you.